I know.
I was trying to guess.
It, there's a story I'll tell you here in a minute. No, I wish.
Okay.
I wish. Shall we?
The floor is yours.
All right, very good. So, hi, Rep. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Garcia. I haven't met any of you because I took a couple years off, and I am so excited to be done. This is my last hurrah, and I graduate. So, in the time that I took off, I've actually gone from working at GameStop, so a fast-moving retailer that was literally fighting for its life, to a railroad that's 160 years old, and it does what it does because that's how we do it. And so it's been a huge culture shift for me. And as part of that, trying to help the organization recognize the value of agility and actually start on that journey towards agility, I want to talk to you a bit about the insights that I've been able to gain from that experience and from some of the research that I was able to do. But ultimately, the message I want to leave you with is that there's a difference between becoming an agile organization and doing an agile method. And so that's what I'd like to talk about. So a couple things that I want to leave you with. First, uncertainty and complexity are two things that, when they come together, drive the need for agility. So as you're trying to understand, does agility make sense, you have to start with understanding how much uncertainty you're dealing with and how complex the situation is that you're in. Agility is not a process, so we'll talk about what that really means. And then finally, that to become agile, your culture and your people have to evolve. And those changes have to emerge over time. They're not something that you can come in and just implement and voila, you become an agile organization. So often in business, we face a crossroads. And there's decisions that have to be made. There's questions that have to be answered. And which direction we should go may not become clear. And ultimately, when you're in those situations of uncertainty, there's complexity that comes because of that. So in a business situation, you may not know what the demand is. You may have an idea. You have an idea of what it is that the market wants. You may think that this product might make sense. You might think that this business need you can solve with a piece of technology or a new process, but you don't really know what that demand is. Okay, the customer said that they want to give me this widget, but they don't know what the coffee maker really needs to do. I talked about earlier. They don't really understand the details of the product that they're asking you to build, and it's those details that ultimately lead to a good plan. Emerging technology. Y'all are all familiar with the fact that technology is changing at an incredibly rapid pace. And because of that, the context, the systems that we build, the environment, the ecosystem that they exist in is always changing. And the tools are always changing, and it's almost impossible to keep up. And because of all those things, ultimately, when you're building a new product, how do you find the right people that have the experience and the insights and the know-how to really build a solid plan? It's hard to find people that have experience when you're working with technologies that have only been around for a year or two versus some of those that have been around for 30 or 40 years. So uncertainty creates complexity. And then from there, your complexity, understanding your complexity in that context, helps you understand your approach. So if you look at this from the perspective of, we have business uncertainty and we have technical uncertainty. So business uncertainty, again, might be, what's the demand? What are the requirements? What does this product really need to do? Technical uncertainty, how am I going to do it? What are the right set of tools that I need to bring and put together to create a product? Because ultimately, building a product out of software takes a lot more than just one component. It's about bringing a set of components together, especially when you're talking about doing this in the context of a large organization. So you have simple things, right? So what is simple? So something that would be simple is something that it's ultimately, the knowns are known. As a leader, you can sense the situation that you're in. You can go to the set of best practices and you can say this applies. When you're in baking and you're processing alone, it's generally always going to follow the same process. You don't have to think about, how do I need to handle this situation, because any deviations from the norm most likely have already been seen. There's an answer for it, and your team can just go get those things done. So you figure out, you categorize it, hey, this is a simple thing, this best practice applies, let's go take action on it. So that's that domain of simple things where there's very little uncertainty. So the next level up would then be those things that are complicated. Complicated is where you need experts. You need expertise. You need people that have experience, because there are unknowns, but they're known. You know that you need to go figure this thing out. And so your first step as a leader is to go do some analysis and uncover those unknowns based on your good practices in these type of domains. So if you're high on the business uncertainty, you should probably go get an end user. You should probably go get somebody who's actually going to go buy this product and use it, because they're going to have the insights around what is the actual problem that this product has to solve. Or perhaps it's an architect or someone that can really design complex systems if you're in this situation. So you want to get experts involved. You want to sense that, hey, there's some uncertainty here. I need to go build a group of experts, bring them together, and come up with some answers so that we can make progress. From there, though, as you go into this larger domain of, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things that I don't know. You enter this arena of complexity, and there's not necessarily a right answer. You have to be able to become comfortable testing some things, taking some ideas, making some risks to be able to make progress, because ultimately, to move forward, to create the product, you have to get out of that realm of uncertainty. You have to start figuring things out. And so where things were complicated and you know about the unknowns, in this complex arena you have unknowns. And really, how can you figure that out? By building a plan. You need to have a plan, you need to have an idea of where you're going, what it is that you're trying to solve, but you also need to approach it from a scientific perspective. You've got a hypothesis, you have a couple of potential opportunities or solutions that could help answer those questions. You need to be able to take action, because ultimately through those experiments, your answers will emerge. And it's really all about probing, making those experiments, sensing, looking at the actual outcomes, and then responding based from a more informed perspective, because you've actually taken some tangible steps forward. And then finally, you have chaos. I have no idea what's going on. I have a million decisions that I need to make all at once, and how am I supposed? And you get stuck in these situations. And ultimately, when there's so many things that are unknown, you have to start taking some action. And this is where, as a leader, coming in and setting a direction for a team can be very valuable, but also giving them some room to experiment. When you're in this realm of chaotic, things are hard. And at the same time, though, that's where some really valuable things, some really valuable innovations can come. And so finding a way to work in that arena is certainly helpful. But for this talk, we're going to focus on complexity, because that's where I think agility really makes the most sense and can add the most value. So what is agility? Agility, as we said, it mitigates complexity. It helps you overcome this arena where you have these unknowns and you need to be focused. It helps your teams, though, embrace change. And really what agility is all about is about change. When you're in an uncertain arena and things are complicated or complex, again, you don't know what those outcomes, you don't know what those right answers might be. And so if you get tied to, this is the only way that I can do this, and the ultimate answer ends up being that you need to be over here, well, you're stuck. And so you have to be able to change, whether it's the direction or the way that you're going to solve the problem, or the market or the demand. You have to be able to embrace change when you're in these areas of complexity. You have to focus on value. There are many different ways in which you can deploy your resources towards solving business problems. You have to keep them focused on the most important ones, and that's really at the core of agility. Yes, you have to be able to change, and you have to be able to adapt as you learn things from the experiments that you're taking on, but you have to make sure that the direction you're going is focused on the most important things, because in a world of limited resources, in a world where you want to be able to deliver value quickly, you got to stay focused. And so understanding what's valuable is going to be important. And then finally, maybe this is obvious, but you have to be able to move quickly. We heard it earlier. Organizations change, priorities change, and if you're halfway through a project and it gets put on the shelf, you spent some money, but you didn't get the value. So how do you make sure that you can take things in small chunks, embrace the change, but stay focused on the value and move quickly? So, is your industry complex? Mine is software, right? So software, if you look at this on a scale of technology uncertainty, demand uncertainty, this was something that was done in HPR a couple of years ago. It's all the way up there at the top. 10% of their revenue on average goes to R&D, 70% of that revenue volatility. There's just so much uncertainty in this arena. And so because of that, agility makes sense in the area of software, but really it makes sense in many businesses, especially when you're talking about engineering and you're in situations where new technology, new solutions are coming out. The industry is going in different directions. You're having to build new products. So agility again, applies in many different arenas because of the complexity that we have to deal with. So how do you become agile? You can follow a process, right? There's lots of different processes, so I'll focus in on software for a minute here, right? So, you might have heard of Scrum or extreme programming or disciplined agile development, scaled agile framework if you want to go and do this for a big organization. There's lots of different methods that have emerged over the last 10, 15 years that are all agile. In fact, if you look at the definition of agile in lots of places, they might even point you to some of these methods. And so, okay, let's carry that forward. So we'll say the Longhorn team decides to adopt Scrum. And so that means that they're going to have a backlog, and they're going to spend time, again, figuring out what are the most important things. They're going to break them up into small, deliverable pieces. They're going to have a daily stand-up. I've got a stand-up, I've got a Scrum meeting, so I'm doing Agile, right? I'm doing things in 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I'm going to go through a cycle. I'm going to work items out of this backlog. I'm going to review it at the end of that, make sure that it actually meets the business objectives that the team committed to. We're going to have a retrospective. We're going to talk about what worked and what didn't so we can adapt our approaches in the future. And look, in 2 weeks, I've got a product. I've got something that I might be able to ship, and the customer celebrates because the team's doing Agile now, right? But process isn't enough, right? And when we're talking about our teams that exist inside of these huge organizations, and even in the small ones, just taking on that process in the context of a team isn't going to get you there. Who's ever had a project stuck in committee? We're done. We're done. The product works. We've tested it. The customer wants it. Are you sure? Are you sure it's ready? How many times do you get stuck waiting for approval? My team's Agile. We did this in 2 weeks. We're ready to go. Nope, sorry. Let's talk about it. Are you sure? Are you sure you're ready? Look, we've got a bench, beautiful view, but our customer's on the other side of the fence. Right? There's organizational barriers that get in our way every day, right? I've got a software development team that can build a great piece of software, but they're not the ones that actually put the product into our production environment. I've got to have engineers and system administrators involved. I have to have DBAs to go move my data scripts into place so that my software can actually leverage those things. There's organizational barriers that if I just solve this in the context of my team, they don't go away. So how do I overcome those? And then finally, okay, we're going to go change. So I'm going to go. Hey, I'm a director. I'm a leader in the organization. You're going to go do this. We're going to go do this because we're going to go solve this problem. This is the most important thing. And as leaders, our words carry weight. And I think sometimes we don't recognize the weight that carries and the way in which the behaviors that we see from our teams follow. When we're directing the change, when we're telling them what to do, we're telling them not to think about it. We're telling them just go do this. And when your goal is an organization that's able to adapt, that's able to change, that's able to say this is the most important thing and to move quickly, if they're dependent on you telling them what to do, how are they ever going to achieve that? So we've got to be able to evolve. We've got to be able to change. Clearly, telling people what to do won't work. Just doing this in the context of a team won't work. But then again, I'm not a CEO, and I don't know if there's anyone else that's in here that is that. If so, congratulations. If not, you probably don't have the power to go change every business process that your company uses today. So we have to figure out how to make small changes over time to evolve our culture, to go from the left side to the right side, which are two completely different pictures. But here with Escher's, artwork, you can see just little changes over time can make pretty dramatic effects. So our cultures have to change, and they have to evolve slowly, and they have to emerge. And the way that you do that is partially through experimentation. Hey, we're going to go look at how this system's working, and we're going to go make a couple of changes. And we're going to inspect it. We're going to see what the outcome is. We're going to see if this is working. We're going to see if it's not. We're going to see if it helps our teams become more productive, to move more quickly, to handle change. And those things that work, we're going to adapt. We're going to take those on, and we're going to do them more often, and we're going to start to spread them. And then as leaders, our job then is to certify that change. And so instead of us directing that change and saying, you're going to go do this, we give our teams the freedom to identify some things that they think they can do to make some small improvements. And when those things pay off, we reward them for doing that. And we help share that with the rest of the organization, because doing it in the context of a small team is not going to get us there. You have to be able have those spread throughout your organization. But again, it's not our job as leaders to tell them to go do this. It's our job to create an environment where they are comfortable and empowered and able to do that so that we can then certify those changes and spread them throughout the organization. So to get there, our structures have to change. We have to go from a management hierarchy of command and control and focus less on hierarchy and more about connections, right? It's not important who I report to. It's important who I know. There's value in long connections across our organizations. There's an incredible amount of value you can get from an engineer having a relationship with a product manager, or a product manager having a relationship with somebody in the finance department. And that cross-functional team coming together around initiative and bringing their expertise to the table and working together to solve those problems. But if they can't do that because they don't have the same manager and they're not on the same team, how are you ever going to move quickly? How are you ever going to be able to identify what's the most valuable thing? Because the diversity of insight and capabilities that you get from those networks, from those long connections, are what help you become more agile. Those are the things that help you to move quickly and to be adaptable and to stay focused on the most important things. So our structure has to change, our leadership has to change. We've talked a little bit about this. We have to be less controlling. It's not about us telling. It's not about us managing people, right? Our job is to lead people, to help them understand that they are in their positions for a reason. They're good at their jobs. They know what they're doing. They don't need us to tell them how to do that. They don't need to they don't need leaders to hand them a set of tasks. They need leaders to help them understand what problems they need to go solve and what the value of solving that problem is, and then they need to go do it. Our job as managers and as directors and as leaders ultimately is not to do our team's work. It's not to tell our teams how to do their work. If we want to achieve agility, if we want to be able to have adaptable teams and adaptable organization that can stay focused on value, we have to let our teams do their jobs, and we have to stop telling them how to do it. And so it's not about us controlling it as leaders. It's about us letting the teams take charge. And then finally, our people have to change, right? They've been used to, in many cases, especially my organization, this command and control hierarchy where they've been told what to do, where every time they want to have something done, they have to go get approval. And they don't have to just get approval from their manager, they have to get approval from the committee, right? And so that has reinforced a set of behaviors. And that has reinforced for them that it doesn't matter what they think. They're not the ones that are in charge. So we need to start identifying those individuals that are open-minded, that are willing to challenge the status quo, that are willing to try new things. Because this is ultimately going to be a change for the organization, and it's going to be a change for them. And so you have to find those early adopters that are going to help get on board to show that this can actually add value. They have to be able to wear a couple of different hats. And talk about this one for a minute. It's important to have a cross-functional team, but it's also important to have a team that can handle many different things if you want to achieve agility. So your direction might change. And so in the software world, a quick example for me is the ecosystem that my team supports has 4 different technologies. And I can staff my teams where I've got, let's say, 3 people across those 4 different technologies. They all have deep expertise in each of those. But what happens if the changes that I need to focus on for the next quarter are all focused on just one of those technologies? Do I get rid of 9 of my team members? Do they sit idle? Or can I have them work with the other 3 that have that expertise to focus on the area where we need to focus most? And so you need to understand the set of skills that are needed for you to deliver value, for you to deliver the products that you're responsible for. But you also have to recognize that your teams then have to develop a set of dynamic capabilities. You have to train them, you have to give them opportunities to try new things and to work in other areas with their peers so that you then have that flexibility within your organization to focus on different things. And then finally, you got to find the innovators. You got to find the people that are willing to say, hey, I think we should try this. And then be willing to go try it and be willing to speak up and do that. So some things to remember. Uncertainty creates complexity, right? From simple all the way up to chaotic. And as leaders, it's important for us to understand the context where we are for any given problem that we're trying to solve or that our teams are trying to solve, and to take the right approach. That context matters. When you're in that arena of complexity, agility is your friend. Agility is your friend, and to do that well, you ultimately have to practice. Again, across these different areas, if you're going to be able to move quickly, you have to have some practice. Your teams have to have some practice. You have to give them opportunities to take some risks and to do these things. And then finally, your culture change, it has to evolve. You have to let that change emerge. You can't take this top-down command and control approach to driving these type of changes when ultimately the message that you're trying to send to your teams is that you have the power to drive the change. I'm here to support you. I'm here to certify the change that you find, but you know how to do your job better than I do. I'm going to let you do that. So those type of things, they change over time. This is not something where you can expect that, again, we're going to go adopt Scrum and we're now Agile. It's not enough. You have to actually let those changes emerge. You have to focus on the culture. You have to focus on the people. You have to focus on how you lead your teams. And you have to focus on the structure of your company and what it is, the message that you're sending. Are you actually empowering your teams? Are you giving them the ability to be flexible and to move quickly and focus on value? So that's it. I think I talked a little fast, but that's my presentation. Questions?
Okay, questions? Uh-oh.
So I really like the idea of cross-functional training because, it's one of the things that has benefited me personally. But one of the challenges I noticed, with that, just from employee feedback or, things like that, was that there was no one, sometimes there was that challenge of people actually having in-depth knowledge of one thing. And so if they're going to advance in whatever, line of business or whatever they're in, it was just tough. It was tough. One of my previous bosses had that challenge because she knew so much of everything that, even people that are managers of those different units will come to her, but she could not advance just because she had not spent as much time on. So is that something that you considered, or is there any?
So I guess two ways you could take that. One, you develop so much expertise that you can't get out of the position because the organization is dependent on you being in that position. Is that the perspective you're coming from, or is it shaking your head back there? So,
No, the perspective is, you develop expertise in all these different things because instead of spending much time on one, instead of spending much time on one, you're cross-training, and
Understood.
so you know a little bit of everything, but not in depth in.
Yeah, so I talked to my team about them being T-shaped individuals. And so what I mean by that is that you do need to have some depth in an area. It's important to develop some expertise in an area, but it's also important for you to have some breadth. You need to understand what your peers are doing. You need to be able to fill in for them as needed. But there's still value in that depth, and we're going to help you in your own personal development to establish that because it is critical. But at the same time, it's just as important because you're part of a team that's solving problems together to understand what it is that your peers are doing, because I don't expect for you to just know your bubble. I expect for you to understand how your bubble impacts, or how your module, how your component impacts the larger business process, because it's in that context of the larger business process that we deliver business value. And so T-shaped, Taco Bell is an example. I think they called it ACES, something, I can't remember the name of it, but what they would do is on off-peak hours, they would have people take on different positions. During peak hours, everyone went back to their station where they were experts, and so they're able to increase their throughput on their line during peak hours, but during the non-peak, that's when they gave folks opportunities to learn how to do those other pieces. Somebody calls in sick. I've worked in this other area before. It's not completely foreign to me.
So I guess my question was around if you, during your research, did you experience like multiple different industries that have tried Agile? Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe some examples of the different industries where it worked or where it didn't work?
Yeah.
And then I guess as far as like the receptibility of how open people were to adopting this type of change?
Yeah. So I did actually quite a bit of research on the origins of agility. Agile didn't come from software. It emerged in the 90s as a response to hyper-competitive marketplaces and big industrial corporations that had always had their approach to strategic advantage or competitive advantage was to be defensive. I'm going to put up barriers so that other people, other corporations cannot compete with me in this arena, whether it's geographic or cost of entry or other things. But as technology emerged and as products became more personalized, their marketplaces became much less predictable. Whether that's in what are the volumes that I'm going to have in this particular type of product, or what's the mix that I need. So those manufacturing organizations that have been around for years and years, they started losing ground. And this was their response to that. This is the natural progression from lean, which focused on efficiency, right, and continuous improvement and always doing things better, to, Agile is not necessarily about efficiency. It's about being able to change, to respond to change. It's about being able to stay focused on the most important things. And so there's certainly an influence from lean there, but it originated in manufacturing companies that were going out of business. DuPont was an example of an organization I read about. There's a couple of grocers. I mean, there's just so many different examples, but it didn't start with software. Technology was part of what started leading us down that path, but it wasn't inherently software where it started.
So you say that with Agile, you need to have some depth apart from the breadth of knowledge that we have. But how do you look at this when you're trying to develop a team, and going forward, how do you see the future of that team? Because you're not focusing on one thing at a time in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Down the years, when you're
As an individual or as a team?
as an individual.
Yeah, so I guess when you're taking this approach, the good thing is that the iterations tend to be short. And so you're going to evolve your focus over time. And so whether it's 2, 3, 4-week commitments that you're making for a 10 to 12-week release, your focus is going to shift, and the team's objectives are all shared. So people will have opportunities to work on lots of different things. I don't think I'm answering your question, though. Part of where I think you have to get is that the teams are starting to assign the work to themselves. As a manager, so let's say you're a resource manager, not necessarily the person responsible for the project, you're responsible for the people. You have to give them goals. You have to set some objectives around and set some expectations around them building their own skills. And so they don't have objectives that are just these team objectives on delivery. They also have objectives around, or perhaps rewards, right, around building up their own skill sets. And you start getting specific as a manager on, hey, you need to work on developing this. And so that person is then going to approach this from a perspective of, hey, I need to take on some of these pieces of work because that's going to help me to develop my skills. I know that as I do that, my manager is going to support me with the training and with the input from other experts on the team that can help me grow in that. So I think there's different ways you can approach it. But the reality is, if you're training people on things that aren't needed at the time, why are you training them on it?
Okay. And my second question is, do you think that moving to Agile would compromise the quality of products over time that we are delivering?
I think Agile is a more disciplined development method when done well than the traditional project management approaches that we've been taking in the past. It's really about the culture that you create. I didn't focus on quality in this presentation. I did in my paper. Quality has to be key. So from a software perspective, and really in general, I think quality has to be baked into how you do things, right? So for a couple of my development teams, I expect that when they develop a function, they develop the automated tests that are going to validate that function, and that a business user accepts that working unit before they say that it's done. And they have to do that within the time box that they've committed to doing that. So for us, a piece of work isn't done just because they delivered the function. That piece of work is done because they delivered the function and the automated test and the appropriate documentation and had the sign-off from the business user that, yeah, this was done, or the architect if it's an architectural component, right? So we bake that into the process. We just don't do it for the whole thing. We do it in little pieces. Small batches, done often, helps you deliver value more frequently.
Okay.
So did you have to sell this to your current company or before they adopted it? Because you said your current company is 160 years old, so.
Yeah. I don't think they realized what they were asking for when they told me they wanted to. But so BNSF is, we're on a journey right now towards modernization, moving off of our mainframe and re-implementing, re-architecting a lot of our ecosystem. And so that has created an opportunity for us to step back and talk about how we do our work. as well as what it is that we need to deliver. And so I've been able to leverage that to the benefit of my team. You know, I will say that I have created a bit of a bubble for my team, so I've got about 65 developers working across 4 different initiatives right now. We're actually I'm going to be supporting another program spinning up. That's in another part of the department where we've been working to influence the process that they've defined. So the organization is going there, they have to. That's just the reality of we're not working on mainframes anymore. We're not making little incremental changes to 30-year-old software. We're building a brand new ecosystem. And so we have to be intentional with our approach, and we've got to stay focused on value. So there was an opportunity that I was able to take advantage of. You know, the good thing of a 160-year-old company is they're not going away. They're not going to get disintermediated, so there's some longevity to the capital. And so we'll have an opportunity to see how this plays out over the next couple of years. I'm excited about it. It's got its set of challenges, but I think we're in it for the long haul.
I enjoyed the presentation. I wanted to press you a little bit on governance and KPIs and how you measure the value. From looking at the presentation, it was almost evangelical in its fervor.
Yep.
But as a manager, I would want to see the numbers supporting the value.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you can only put so much in the presentation. So there has to be a framework for governance around this. You know, we actually look at it from 3 levels. We have a portfolio, program, and team. And we have a different set of activities that happen at each one of those levels. So at our portfolio, we are talking about what are the long-term strategic investments that we're going to make, how much money are we willing to put into these areas, what's the business value we expect to get. At a program level, we break those down into increments that can be delivered in 3 to 6 months with a business case, and then break those down into pieces that are then fed to the teams. And so there is some overhead to that, right? And it's not necessarily fully aligned with let the team pick what they want to work on, but there are absolutely some governance patterns that you put in place as you scale this up. And part of that is looking at the value that you actually get back out of it. So I've got a dashboard. I can see what my team's focused on in iteration, in a release. We haven't done as well, I think, on the looking back, what are the results that I'm getting out of this. I support marketing, so we've got CRM, call centers, and our customer website. So I can look at how they're being used, how many cases we're creating, or opportunities the sales folks are using, but tying that back to dollars can be hard just because of the business unit that I support. So that's something where I think we could do better. I do agree with you, though. It's very important. You can't just go work on anything, and you have to be able to be transparent about what you're working on and have good visibility to that. And there's lots of ways to accomplish that. So a lot of people hear Agile and they think cowboy, they think no documentation, they think no process, no discipline, and lots of people do it that way and it doesn't work. If you take that disciplined approach, though, you can make it work in a large organization.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a really interesting presentation. Okay, Andy, I'm going to pull the plug at this spot, okay? I think all the energy has gone out of the room, and continuing to push is going to do us no good whatsoever. And